Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
We are recording. Sasha Graham, welcome to Weird Web Radio. It is awesome to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm more excited than you are. No. For folks who have not heard of Sasha, first, shame on you. Second, on the back of your amazing book, The Magic of Tarot, people, you've heard me recommend a lot of tarot books over the last 7 seasons of this show. This is my new breadwinner. It is the #1 recommendation that I have. So please go out and get it. The Magic of Tarot, Your Guide to Intuitive Readings, Rituals, and Spells by Sasha Graham. Not to mention, the art looks very familiar. It looks like it should be in your Dark Wood Tarot.
Yeah, it is an Abigail Larson original illustration for the cover of this particular book. Yes, so it is the same artist as Darkwood Tarot, but you won't find the image in the deck. It's only on the book. Okay,
I love that consistency too, because Deborah Blake does that with her artist Elizabeth. Like, you know, their whole Everyday Witch brand they've sort of created, and it's beautiful, and I love their stuff too.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sasha Graham, hey, that's you, is the best-selling author of over 10 books and tarot kits, including this one. Let's see here. You've got 365 tarot spreads, Llewellyn's complete book of the Rider Waite Smith Tarot. That's becoming a mouthful now, isn't it? I just call it Waite Smith. And the aforementioned Darkwood Tarot. She teaches tarot classes and produces tarot events at New York City's premier cultural institutions, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Sasha has appeared on film, television, radio, and in the New York Times. That's fucking cool. Visit her at sashagraham.com. All right. I've appeared on film too, but nothing like you have. I have, yeah. There's a show called Hellier. You ever heard of it? Mm-mm. It's a documentary series. It's on Amazon Prime, YouTube, I think Hellier.tv. It's won film awards. It was way more successful than any of us ever dreamed it would be. It's a paranormal investigation into creepy things in Kentucky, basically. And it's filmed in a totally different way. Carl Pfeiffer is the man behind the camera and the editing and the filming, and he was on Ghost Hunters International, I think, years ago. He's not them. He's a totally different filmmaker, and it's beautiful the way he does these things. But anyway, the Planet Weird TV crew, Greg Newkirk, Dana Newkirk, Tyler Strand, Connor Randall, and Carl Pfeiffer. They all did this Hellier series, 2 seasons. It's out there, and then they have a new one out called The Unbinding. And that's up in your area if you're up in the New York area, concerning a potentially haunted figure that was found in a mountain cave or something. So, and what they did about that. So it was pretty neat. Enough about me. We're not here to talk about me. Everybody's heard me ramble enough. So first thing I want to do is let everyone know this is the first episode of season 8. So thank you all for continuing to support the show. That means the world to me. And Sasha, you get to launch a brand new season. So first thing I like to ask new people around here, especially those who are not from the official professional paranormal investigation realm. Sasha, have you ever experienced a haunting?
Yes. However, it's a funny thing. A haunting, not in the sense that it was terrifying, but there have definitely have been things around me. Yet, in terms of terrifying hauntings, that tends to happen more from real life people than ghosts.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not going with terrifying. I'm just going with whatever you think of a haunting.
Yeah, definitely.
Something with some sort of spirit activity or some paranormal type phenomena you couldn't explain. You ever have anything like that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, my very first loft in New York City. So we're going back to, gosh, the early 90s. Back in the day, and I still live in Midtown. All of the buildings are long and narrow.
Mhm.
I had this giant raw space, this long, narrow space. It was the entire floor. The elevator opened up right into the living room, into like the main space. And there had been, I am pretty sure at this point, like a serial killer living there before me. And I remember cleaning out the space before we did some construction. We found driver's licenses, like driver's licenses, and just a lot of odd things. And then as I continued to live in the space, darkness just seemed, it was weird, it was odd, it was I would say it's the closest I've ever come to living in something that felt like a vortex to another space that I didn't want to be a part of. Now, it may have been the energy of New York back in the day too. I had like a dominatrix living downstairs. But
As one does.
as this is why we moved to New York City. But even the owner of the building, he had a hardware store on the first floor. And asked him one day, I said, Jeff, I have to ask it, don't think I'm crazy, but is this building haunted? And he looks at me, right, with this crazy kind of like, I got like his eyes got big. He goes, Sasha, I don't know from haunting, but I can tell you this. Come, and he goes, these things appear on my shelves from time to time and on the shelves of his store. And he brings out this box full of antique keys and antique latches that he says just appear. It was a very, very spooky place, and there's a lot of odd things. Yeah, so definitely that's probably the most harrowing place I
I
ever
like it too.
been.
I,
Yeah.
I love the whole setup of it. You've got a dominatrix in one part, a hardware store in another, because they're good business partners probably, and then a tarot pro above them.
I wasn't doing tarot back then. But something else that's quite spooky about the old buildings on my block, that building is now gone. They've put up a luxury hotel, but I live in the building next door. And all of the older buildings, we've all still got dirt basements. So think about it,
Oh,
middle of Manhattan, and it's really interesting because a lot of the buildings in New York City, you would hear stories about people that would fish in their basements, in their dirt basements, because there would be
what?
springs running through them. Yeah. So I still feel kind of like very connected to what used to be on the island of Manhattan, just due to the fact that we've still got a dirt basement. It feels kind of like, I don't know. It still feels like a portal, but my current building is awesome. It's not haunted at all. In a
It's
bad
not haunted at all.
well, New York City is a haunted place, of course. I mean, the energy is all around, but it's not spooky like that place next door was wild. It was
That
wild.
is cool. Yeah. I wanted to sort of start at the beginning with you because I noticed immediately you say you were born on Halloween.
Yes.
All right. So your birthday's coming up soon. um what what was that like growing up, I guess, with such a major holiday, right? That's not Christmas, but it is my favorite. Like, but this is also your birthday. How did your family navigate that for you?
It was I have always loved my birthday. It has always been fucking awesome. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I am not gonna lie. It was always incredible. And I grew up, we moved all over the country. So I was constantly moving. We were constantly changing states, but we were always in these beautiful rural places and quite often living on farms. And there's
Mm.
just no more fun fall place to be than on a farm with pumpkins and barns and apples and parties often, so there was always some sort of a celebration, cake or whatever, and then it would be trick or treating, and it always felt to me like, wow, the whole world is celebrating with me too. Everybody's getting presents. It's not just for me, it's all of us. And we get to dress up and be spooky. Like, I love it. I love it.
That is cool. Again, I had to wonder. Yeah, I've got a daughter who was born very near Christmas, and it was always very mindful of how do you make these things balance out somehow. But if she had been born on that holiday, I don't know what we would have done.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing, right? How people treat. So I had a grandmother out in Iowa, and she would always call me the Good Witch of the East and call herself the Good Witch of the West.
Oh,
And she
nice.
would send me artwork and like paper dolls that she would make with myself, like as a witch, and then all my little like witching costumes that I could cut out. So I felt very comfortable with being a witch. Like I felt like I really was. Like I did feel
Hmm.
and special, and somehow having a hand in the other world because my birthday was Halloween as well. And because I think my family encouraged it, which family.
So you and your mom moved around a lot like that. Um, I'm kind of curious. What do you think one of the most important lessons is you learned from your mother?
Well, the lesson I learned, something my mom, I did not like moving around so much. I didn't like it at
Hmm.
all. In fact, especially when I was school age and I would constantly have to move to a new school and make new friends, she would always look at me and say, Sasha, it builds character. You're building character. And I took that to heart. Like I really did, even though I didn't like it. And now, all these years later, um, I'm really grateful for the fact that I find my home like in myself. And even though I'm very grounded, like I've been on the same block in the city for over 30 years, and this house up in the Catskills I've had for almost 20. Um, but I feel like I also am very much at home in the world and moving around so much, and also moving to quite rural places, you get a sense of the energy because you're outside as a kid and you're playing. So I feel like I could connect elementally to things that were wild, and I was never stuck feeling like, I don't know, like I had to be part of what. I was never from anywhere. I'm not from anywhere,
Yeah, that is interesting.
which is kind of witch like in a way. Like it's
Hmm.
all of it. Do you know? It's kind of cool.
That is cool. Um, did you have a favorite place? All that moving around. Any of them stand out as like, wow, I really, really enjoyed things there, or
Yeah, I mean, I really loved living in Vermont, and that was
uh,
where I started school, like kindergarten. So I loved Vermont. I love the mountains there. There's a different. Every mountain range has its own energy. There's something that really feels like home to me, in Vermont, and I can feel it the minute I cross the state line. And I can stack wood like you wouldn't believe. Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, I would say Vermont. But I will also say that I spent every summer in Connecticut with my grandmother, and she would bring me into New York City. So
Mhm.
that was like the counterbalance to not really living anywhere. Every summer I could count on my grandmother's wonderful house in Connecticut and trips to the city. So it was a beautiful piece of both worlds, wild and urban. Yeah.
Yeah, very liminal that way.
Hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Um, one you talked about mountains having their own kind of energy and stuff. One thing that every location seems to have, anywhere where humans gather into a community, is folklore
Yes.
and its favorite spot, right? Or the one the kids always talk about, or the local legend, something to that effect. So, since you've been a lot of places, um, are there some of those that really stand out? Is one of those you think if people are out traveling, they really ought to go see or experience, or just something that you really, really loved?
Oh, the folklore. Gosh. I think that there's folklore in Vermont around the old logging trails. And I think that those old logging trails, because they were also a space that was completely kind of dominated by men, and I think just like just like the gold rush or any, situation where it's just men working together and you find very few women around. I think it takes on an energy of its own that sometimes feels a little bit nefarious. I I remember there was an overturned pail with a face on it up the mountain, and we would call it the legend of Pale Face, who was on the logging road. So the folklore that goes back to people on these desolate mountains in the middle of winter, right, when there's nobody else around. You can certainly even feel that up here in the Catskills as well. Yeah, I think that interesting, odd, liminal things happen at the top of mountains. So whether you're looking at the mountain lore of, Vermont, or I just had my 5-year anniversary of going to Mount Everest base camp. And I can tell you there, the energy, the liminality, because also when you're on a mountain, you're at a great height, you're the highest a human can go on foot to kind of touch what you would consider the divine. Things happen in those spaces. I went into the highest meditative cave in the world. There's a meditative cave right there at a monastery at Everest. And it was harrowing in an undescribably amazing way, if that makes sense, because it's much.
It just felt kind of like a lot, or was there something specific that happened?
No, there wasn't something specifically ghostly. But you could feel that things had happened,
Oh, yeah.
You could feel, the monastery had been destroyed during the Cultural Revolution and rebuilt up. There was a charnel ground there because in Tibet, I don't know if they have these wonderful burials in Tibet. You're buried elementally. You're a priest, and your family get together, and based on your astrology, you either get a sky burial where they call it your meat. The meat of your body is chopped up and put out for the vultures to come and eat. That's a sky burial. Or it's burned, or there's a water burial. You get put in the river or in the earth. And so I went out in the morning to see the sunrise with Mount Everest. I didn't realize it, but I had walked over. I was sitting in the charnel ground when the sun came up. But I thought it was amazing. I mean, there were no bodies around me at that point, but yeah, it's wild. I think it's harrowing at sunrise and sunset. I do. Into pockets of time, I think that is quite possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So you say harrowing often, especially concerning like sunrise and sunset and these sort of liminal times. What is it about them that makes it feel harrowing? And when you say harrowing, what do you get this look on your face that suggests you're thinking of something, like you have an idea what that really means. So can you unpack that feeling a little bit?
Sure. When I describe harrowing, it's kind of that entrance into another dimension or a liminal space where it's possible, easily possible to meet and greet things that are not necessarily manifest in a physical form on this earth. So we're talking elemental energies, animal energies, spirit energies, and all of this stuff, language. It's so hard to describe it, right? It's really ineffable, right? You can't really describe these experiences. But when they happen, and I feel as if encounters in a liminal space are a lot like psychic pops. You can't count on them. It's not like you can go, you can set the stage and hopefully maybe someone or something will appear. You can never count on it though. And so often I find it happens when you're least expecting it or you're least looking for it. And suddenly you're there, you've shifted and you're in this space. And it's harrowing because you often, or I have encountered things that do not look, feel, taste, sense anything like what I know of, right? So it's terrifying because I'm experiencing something probably in its purer form. And it can be scary. And so that's why you need to protect yourself and have, your stuff with you or your guides with you. But if I've discovered if I don't run away from it, or if I don't retreat from it, if I just stay with what's there, um, interesting, I learn interesting, fascinating. I just have interesting experiences that
Mhm.
it's harrowing because I can't describe it, and it's bigger than this world. But that to me, and I've spent many, many years I'm highly skeptical, and I want to make sure when I'm experiencing something that it's actually an experience, that it's not just my imagination, right? Because when we read tarot and do the psychic work, so much of it is our imagination, our active imagination. But I'm very interested in the point, that kind of line in the sand between my imagination and something else really communicating or making itself available to me. So I do everything I can to know, so that I know that when it's happening, it's really happening. And when it does, it's just amazing. Again, I don't have a word for it. That's what
Mhm.
music and art is much better at describing this stuff than
Yeah, we know what it is when we're looking at it, but we can't define it, right?
can't define it. It's so, yeah, like if you try and explain to someone, because because these things are not of this world. So I don't think that they're not, because you're not quite in this world when you're experiencing it. Our language fails us when trying to express what it is we felt or experienced.
Okay. Now, you did say in that you need your stuff. Make sure you have your stuff.
Yeah.
And then you said you are a skeptic. I love that because I'm told all the time, like, I'm such a skeptic about all this stuff, yet I'm immersed over my head in all the weirdest shit we do. um, and you said there's a process where you want to know, so
Yeah.
you could know.
Mm-hmm.
What's the process? What would you do?
What do I do? So I have this interesting weird body thing that I figured out how to do. I don't even know how I learned. I just kind of figured it out and intuited it for myself physically. If I'm having a between worlds experience when I'm between wake and sleeping, I have a way of figuring out when I'm actually awake and experiencing something, which has to do with my spine and moving down the
Oh,
chakras, so that I know it's actually happening, that it's not just a dream. And then when I move into spaces, I also make sure I just, it sounds very basic, but I found a spirit guide, an animal spirit guide, and I literally I think I did it with a YouTube video. Like, I just needed somebody to like lead me in. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you could do it on your own, but sometimes you just want to hear a voice being like, "Okay, you're walking down a path."
right.
And whatever works. And so I found a spirit guide that I adore. And I do active. It's a funny thing because at this point, I do so much. It's so I'm constantly kind of exchanging energy with plants and trees. So there's that too. I feel very grounded and connected in the natural world and safe. Like, I feel like I have more than just my spirit guide. Especially if I'm doing this kind of work on my property. It's all very like alive. Like, the entire Darkwood Tarot is literally right outside my,
Nice.
it's where the story and the universe came from, and it's still here, and it's alive and fecund, and they have my back, but I have theirs.
That's that's excellent.
Yeah.
I really love that. Um, Boy, what do we want to go with next?
You got deep. You took me
Yeah,
up.
that's what I like. Something else, you have said the word witch at least a dozen times since we started talking, in reference to your grandmother, making you feel like the witch, in reference to Halloween, feeling like the witch. I realized I never looked that deep, I guess. Do you identify as a witch?
I don't identify with any labels. Like they're silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like because I feel it's like I'm a psychic, I'm an intuitive, and then that comes with all of like the baggage that other people carry. Like
Hmm.
I'm me. I am a witch. I'm a supernatural creature. But I'm not like, but we all are. Like, and that's the thing. So I don't want to like put a label on myself that feels like it also cuts me off from what other people might be. I kind of feel like it seems very arbitrary. But the whole point, or the reason I love witchcraft or the idea of being a witch, is that it is a human who's standing in their power, a human that's engaging in their supernatural power. And that is the whole point of tarot and all of this stuff. And like, I honestly, as far as I'm concerned, it's the point of my journey, everybody's journey in this experience while they're alive, because we're all full of all of these sensitivities and energies and talents, and we're all so different. So, and again, this is why language gets in the way. And this is what I think is really, it can be tough in the metaphysical world and in the books and in the classes. And when you have people standing up and being like, this is this and that is that. And, we're talking about stuff you cannot pin down with words. So I think that it's a tricky, slippery slope in metaphysics. So I think that we each have to be the Indiana Jones of our experience in the
Nice.
material and invisible world. And tarot is, of course, the perfect tool. Like it's the perfect grounding tool because all the systems lay on top of it. It's visual, it's colorful, it's numerological. So all of the stuff works, but we have to be the ones that kind of figures out um, how we respond with the world around us. And everybody, like I always say, like, the way you respond magically, it's as unique as your kiss. It's as unique as your taste in music. And I think that it is the joy of metaphysical practitioners and artists to start to understand what your kind of superpowers are and what gives you pleasure and what gives you power and what is exciting, and to see how far you can go and to see how and where those boundaries lie. Because you know you you can look at the small view of magic, which is like, or the small view meaning like the simple comfortable things that we can do, ritual, music, maybe our community or the way we dress, like all of those fun communal cozy things, your magic room, your ritual table, all of that really fun stuff. But on the other side of that is literally all of potential. And with all of the potential that's in front of you, your potential for experience vis-a-vis brought on through your magical work, through all of the, I think we have so many things that are at our fingertips, and it's easy to forget that we have such incredible power, and magic works. Like it just 100% works. And it always, to me, it works in mind-blowing ways that I never could comprehend. And I just find that to be so exciting. And the older I get, the deeper it gets, and the more kind of mind blowing it is. And the more the world does make, the more my experience as a human on the earth makes sense. And yeah, so I love it. I love the mystery of it all. Which I don't think is meant to be explained. I just think it's meant to be explored and enjoyed and played with. And it just makes, it makes waking up in the morning with the sunrise like an incredible thing because you're present with it. I guess that's the other thing. Like magic brings you alive, right? Magic puts you in the moment. It's very tantric. Like I love that being a witch, to be a witch, you're a connoisseur. of smell, taste, sight, hearing, feeling. You know, yeah, yeah.
You have the greatest sales pitch to be a witch I've ever heard. That is a human standing in their power.
Yeah.
That is amazing. That's the best definition of a witch I've heard, and I've asked a lot of people. You were talking about the older you get, it feels deeper. What does that actually mean, though? What defines deeper for you?
Deeper. So the older that I get, and I'm now birthday coming up, I'm coming into my mid 50s now, and having more experience with death, just vis-a-vis by the nature of getting older, having seeing the cyclical nature of life at this point, right? Watching not just like when you're young, you know, the cycles seem very long and drawn out. You know, a summer when you're 6, when you're like in second
Yeah.
summer is like an eternity. So you can kind of see your former selves, but you can also see your future selves. You can, I don't know, I find aging and witchcraft to kind of go hand in hand, because I think one of the most important things about magic is actually exemplified by the tarot card, by the tower card in tarot, that letting go, right? So you cast a spell or you do a ritual or you're doing whatever, but then at the end of your spell, you say, but I release, like I'm not attached to the outcome. And I think to truly be unattached to life as it unfolds as you get older, as things start not working the way that they used to, as we lose people. Oh, I think I was talking about getting older, witchcraft and getting older.
Yes, we were talking about that, and yeah, let's dive back into that, because it was about the sense of aging and going deeper and what all that kind of really meant, in relationship to all of this stuff.
Yeah. So I think that magical practice and growing older goes hand in hand in really meaningful ways, because I think it helps prepare us for um, for the way that things in the material world and our physical bodies are changing. I think it helps prepare us for the inevitable losing of people. I feel like, well, the Scorpios out here, I'm a Scorpio. I'm obsessed with death and the other side. And it's helped prepare me when I lose, people that are close to me. It doesn't, it, it, it's an incredible, like the space of death is an incredible space to me. Um, Even though on one hand it's an ending and it can be very, I don't know. It, it's all that much richer. And, like it's fall right now. Like I'm looking right out the window. I can see like all of these like yellow and these like golden and orange trees. And I think every fall, it's kind of like the glory of death in the fall, the beautiful, the saturation, the richness, the wild sky. And I like to think that that's all of us as we get older, as we age and we get more, maybe we slow down or like whatever, like life takes its toll on us. But if we stay awake, if we're paying attention, right, if we are that kind of witch, that supernatural creature, then that ripening happens within us, that deepening happens within us. And I also think that there's certain magic that probably shouldn't be cast until you're older. Do you know? I think it's exciting to know yourself magically. Um, and because that's something, internal when you're like, I know for myself, and that's why it's in all of my books. Like, I'm always like, here, you take these tools and figure it out for yourself. Like, I can't hold your hand. Like, you have to be the one to go out and try these things and fail and succeed and just experiment, and I know it, you know, it's a funny thing because a lot of people just want the show, right? They just want the ritual or and those things are all beautiful. But I think the magic itself is um, entirely individually driven, and yeah, and it goes hand in hand. You know, we've all had existential crises. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we're young and you know what is the point and I'm alone, and I think that magic and experiential magic teaches you that you're never really alone, and that to really know that, I think it will help you through. That gives me great peace.
Yeah. You say you're death obsessed with death. Like
Yes.
what is that? Like, is it just a bunch of skulls around the house, or are you visiting graveyards all the time? Like, what makes you death obsessed?
Yeah,
Contemplating your own mortality a lot? Like, what does that
obsessed.
really look like?
So, well, like when I was a teenager, it was like I was a teenager in the 80s. So I was obsessed with vampires and with horror,
Yeah.
and everything about my love, like my life growing up was kind of harrowing and very life or death in certain ways. And so I was like obsessed with horror movies. And then when I moved to New York City to be an actress, everything I was cast in were horror films or horror plays or vampire plays. And I still make horror movies to this day. My directors from the
Nice.
90s, right? I'm still like, yeah. So that idea of, I love the idea of death teaching us how to live. And that's why I love
Mm.
card too. And so I like it when I, when the stakes are high and the monster's after you, right? It's like being in love. Like all the same things are raging inside of you. Like you're hyper paying attention. You're really focusing on what's going on around you. Your breathing is rapid. It's I think it's sexy. Like so being in these heightened environments. Yeah. And so when you're up against death or you're up against something or someone that wants to like kill you or whatever, again, you're really having an experience. You're and I've been fortunate enough when the experiences that I have had with the passing of people that are close to me, I've found the space that opens up to be incredibly intimate. And it's funny because I almost, and this might sound strange, birth makes me squeamish. It feels very messy and very like I didn't, I wasn't like a barefoot hippie, want to do it natural mom at all. Like when I had my daughter, I'm like, give me the drugs. I don't want to look, I don't want to see the blood. So it's birth and spring, not necessarily like my favorite thing, but death, there's something incredible to me about death. And I think it's also incredible to see what the people cycling through, passing between this life and the next, when people are fortunate enough to um, be in their beds and be surrounded by their family. I think that it's amazing. I think it's amazing to look at a dead body and what dead bodies, what just looking at a viewing in a casket, like what it teaches us about how we're alive while we're alive. Do you know? It's like, and
Mm-hmm.
it brings up all these massive, ginormous, consequential questions that we're not going to necessarily have answers to, but they're really fun to try and figure out. So yeah, death obsessed, so that life is as good as it can be while we're here.
Yeah. I have some of that death obsession myself, and I like to walk around cemeteries.
Me too.
And I will often look, 'cause I spent a long time as a bartender and a bar manager dealing with different kinds of people all at once and stuff. And I think about this a lot, especially when I'm walking through a cemetery. You'll see somebody buried over here, some man here, some woman over there. They're nowhere near each other in the cemetery, but I wonder, were they friends?
Mhm.
Did they share secrets with each other? Like, did they know something that could have destroyed the lives of that person over there and that person over there? Like, I wonder that stuff all the time.
Of course. Oh my gosh. So we're talking right now. I'm in my farmhouse is over 200 years old. And of course, there's an overlooked cemetery right up the road. And I was utterly delighted to find the couple that built this house. I found their gravestones
Oh, wow.
there. And so I think it's hilarious when you talk about people buried in a cemetery, especially in older cemeteries where communities were small and everybody knew each other. I mean, could you imagine the shenanigans? All that cemetery got like they're probably like having the biggest party.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody's like hooking up with everyone when they're teenagers. All fun. And then who knows what else after they were married. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, I do want to tell the feds, if you're listening, I know she talked about having a dirt basement, and now she's death obsessed. She's not a criminal, I hope. No.
Not,
Yeah. um, a kid growing up in the 80s, like getting into horror movies and stuff. What were your favorites? What'd you really like back then when you were a kid?
my favorite. So Lost Boys, like top of it in terms of just like it was scary, but it also made me feel like I felt like a lost boy. I love that movie so much. All of them. Night of the
All
Comet.
of them.
Yeah, Night of the Comet, Happy Birthday to Me, Chopping Mall, Freddy Krueger, Poltergeist. Oh my God, Poltergeist, The Shining. God, like I still can't watch that. I like to be scared. I like to be on edge. Yeah, for sure. But I think that 80s horror movies were great because they gave girls incredible protagonists, like the final girls who lived till the end. Do you know what I mean? There were like Jamie Lee Curtis, what a badass, Catherine Mary Stewart in Night of the Comet, total icon. And you didn't see strong female characters really in other movies, like at all. And so,
That's a good point.
yeah, to me, like not only were they really strong and they lived to the end, but they kind of showed you how to like stick up for yourself, because it was not as female friendly, as it's gotten back. It was tough, like I think about all, we were just joking about how like anybody who grew up in a small town, like in the 80s, everybody knew where the child molester house was. Just steer that.
Yep.
Okay. So I always say like Stephen King and all the horror guys had our back. Like our parents weren't paying attention. So the horror movies, told us what to look out for and how to protect ourselves. They were like, an 80s kid's guide to survival.
That is a depth of horror movies I've never heard, but I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, for sure. You said you're in horror movies too. You've gone and acted in movies.
Yes.
Where was I shouldn't say where. Like, how do you get into that kind of thing? And like, what's been really cool about it? What's been really challenging about it?
So this is the funny thing. So of course I moved to New York wanting to be like a big movie star. That was, I'm gonna like make it in theater and in the movies. But what I wound up getting cast as and cast for, like I said before, was scary stuff. Because that's my passion, right? That's probably what lit me up when I would go in for the auditions. I happened to be making movies, independent horror movies in New York City at this rare point in time where Blockbuster was a big thing. That was where everybody got their movies. And the funny thing about Blockbuster were there were all of these low budget indie horror movies that would get sold and packaged and put onto the shelves of Blockbuster. So my little independent horror movies were like right next on the shelf, right next to big budget Hollywood movies. Nice. So what happened? So I made like 16 or 17 of these movies, and I was on the cover of like some of the box art. And so, there was an indie horror scene. So some people knew who I was. All of that now is highly collectible. And in retrospect now, it's like there's just a subculture that any of these movies, like, they want to collect it. And so everything's getting re-released on DVD. And a lot of the directors are going back and making movies again, because now it's super easy to make. Anybody can make a movie now with all of the stuff. So it was something I didn't seek out to do, but it just kind of happened. And I'm delighted that it did, because I never would have thought after leaving acting that, like, in my 50s, I'd be called back, to make movies. And I think I've made 4 of them in the last 5 years. And next week I'm going off to play an Egyptologist professor in a fun horror movie. And so it's just like, I just feel very fortunate. And I'm fortunate in all of the roles that I played in those. I was never a final girl, but I was always like a vampire or a werewolf or a mafia hit chick, or like, again, I played these strong, crazy characters with life and death. I wasn't just the girlfriend.
Nice.
Yeah, like, I was the crazy chick with a split personality that got pushed off the building at the end before she killed 10, she killed. So, yeah, so I guess it's just my karma, I guess. But the funny correlation between that and tarot is that I think that my desire in all of those roles that I was cast in was about finding my power as a supernatural creature, right? As a vampire werewolf. So when I moved into the tarot world, when I was in my 30s, and I was like, oh, tarot is really a device to teach you to hone your supernatural power. And I realized I connected the dots backwards. But it's the same thing. That wise witch, the wise witch is the same as a powerful vampire, as a strong werewolf, meaning that you're an autonomous creature who understands your power, can put down boundaries, protect yourself, protect others. Yeah. So it's all kind of the same thing, if that makes sense.
No, that doesn't just make sense. That's some of the best fucking advice I've ever heard for someone on the path as they grow. You may think you're rambling, but that was some powerful stuff that just dropped out of you, lady.
I know, I'm trying to pontificate.
Yes, that was vitally important. In fact, if you're listening to this, and especially if you're younger and on the path of any kind, play back a couple minutes and listen to what she just said again. I think it's that vitally important. We haven't talked a whole lot about tarot.
No, yeah. Why it's refreshing.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite? You're death obsessed. Who, other than your own deck, who has the best death card?
Ooh, the best death card. I love Kipling West's Halloween Tarot, and her death card. I love her death card because it's really gentle and it's playful, and her skeleton is pouring water into a graveyard, and like these quirky flowers are growing up. So I love that. Like, I love that it's a very safe, like, it's a death card that makes you feel like everything is going to be okay, and it's okay to change, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why, I think beyond the literal meaning of the death card, I think people are uncomfortable with it because people aren't willing. They're not comfortable with change. We want to be in safe places, even if it's not a place we want to be in. And that's another, again, death obsessed, learning to accept change. Then all of the stuff starts to flow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, I love that deck, the Halloween Tarot.
Now, have you ever been doing a reading for yourself or for others that the death card comes up and it's not that metaphorical change? It's actually foretelling
Actual
death.
death?
Yes. I've had it happen to me one time.
Oh, it did?
And I didn't know it at the time, but it was my own father's death. I was giving my mother a tarot reading, and I had the cards laid out in a way that I couldn't quite puzzle out why the death card was where it was in relation to the other cards around it. And I kept telling her, I'm like, there's some big change coming in your life. You're not going to be able to move forward until you do, something has to die before. I'm like, I can't figure this out. And out of nowhere, my dad came out of the hallway and goes, "What are you guys doing?" And I felt this gut level instinct. I think it's him. And I didn't say it. I didn't say a word because I thought that can't be what I'm thinking here. 4 days later, he was dead.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's a heavy experience for you to have gone.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
feel
That was.
did you feel guilty about it, or would it?
No, 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 no. I don't have any of those notions. Like, there are misconceptions out there. The people, I would say it's more like a fear that people have that if you say something like that, or if it happened at the reading, I know I've encountered people's fear of tarot that way. That if you do flip over the death card, then if they say it out loud, then it's going to
Mhm.
make it happen.
Right.
Like, I don't think that's how this plays out, folks. you know, for me, when I'm laying out the cards, there's 78 cards in a deck. Any number or combination of them laid out, I think, is taking a snapshot of different strands and connections in our lives. And it's our relationship to the images and our experiences that bring out that information. And any number of those 78, any combination of those 78 could carry meaning and impact for you. But for some reason, it's this 3 or this 9 or this 12 or whatever you do. What is it for you when you lay those out? How do you think it's working? What do you think is the mechanism behind that brings out real depth and meaning?
Well, I think it's the tarot reader's personal practice. So again, that personal practice is going to look different for different people. I can say that for myself, the space that I construct around the reading, and then the way the cards appear to me in a spread have taken on a timbre that I've never heard anybody else describe, but I understand it when I'm seeing it. For me, it becomes very much like those 3D books that we used to look at, the 3D puzzle books where you'd like fuzz your eyes and you'd see things
Yeah.
pop out. So if I'm doing a big multi-card spread, the narrative that especially if I'm reading for someone else, the narrative that the cards want me to follow are right there in what's leaping out in that way, which means some cards are red and some other cards aren't, but I see it. I see the line and where it goes. And that's just been developed over time and practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, tarot, when I talk about tarot as a practice, meaning it is something that you do every day, that you give time to, whether it's 2 or 3 minutes, but that you stick with. And I can honestly say at this point, tarot, I have a tarot practice going on the better part of, I guess, 2, maybe 3 decades. And sometimes we're close and entwined, and other times I'm not so much. But it's always there, and it's always a conversation. And and therefore, like everything else, I think it ripens and it deepens.
Now, I like when you said that sometimes a card will go unread,
Yeah.
because one of my favorite personal ways to read is just a 9-card kind of tableau, right?
Mm-hmm.
3x3. And I look for the narrative in it. None of these cards for me have positional meanings. It's just I'm looking for where my eye goes first. And then I follow that thread as the story unfolds. And there have been times where, for instance, maybe the card in the top right corner has a figure who has a hand pointing in a certain direction. And the card directly underneath that one has a figure that has their back turned, it seems, to everything else in the spread. And I'm like, maybe they don't want to be part of this story, And that's kind of how I see that. And I let it play out in my readings.
Yeah. And it gives you it gives you the greater context so that you can really see what's happening, like where the energy is, where the storyline is kind of moving. And what I think is always so fascinating is that any of us could be like, I could give you a reading, and this is, and I could start telling you the story of what I see with the cards, but anybody could be sitting, like you could do that to an entire group of 30, 40, 100 people, and everybody would take away meaning from that story.
Yes.
That's what I think is really fascinating. But then I also think that it's the crazy intuitive psychic stuff that's more than just a story, that, that the details that slip out when you're not even, when you're just going, right? When you're just reading the cards, and listening to everything, or paying attention to everything that's going on inside of you as you're doing the reading.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I think things that are not coincidence happen. And I find that very exciting too.
Yeah. It's like you pay attention to your intuition, especially when you feel locked in and tuned into those cards.
Yeah.
And the environment around you is going to provide clues.
Mm-hmm.
You'll feel it at a deep gut level. I promise you this, folks. And um, Sasha is exactly right. You've got to be a part of that environment.
And I always say, like, if something pops in, especially if you're reading for someone else, if something pops into your head and makes no sense, say it. Definitely say it, because that information isn't meant for you. And if you say it 9 times out of 10, the other person will be like, oh my God, like, because it'll mean something crazy to them. When you read for another person, you don't necessarily have to understand what you're talking about. You don't even, like, I used to feel like I had to feel what they were feeling. Like, I was so empathic, right? And I realized that I could just stick with the symbolism of what I saw. And there was no reason for me to, like, try and get all up in their head and understand and feel where they were. I could just deliver the information that I saw, and that was enough. And it was probably better, because it was less of me and more about them, which I think is important as a reader, because you're there to be of service for the person sitting across from you. It's not about
Yeah. Yeah. That, and there will be times too. I remember this one particular reading stands out to me. Someone, a twin, had lost their twin. Their twin had died, and they had the ashes, part of the ashes, in the ring, and they were asking me if I could do some sort of mediumship type reading. I don't do that. I just not my style. I don't. I like. I have a high degree of skepticism for that kind of thing, and not that I don't think it's possible. It's just like my brain isn't wired that way.
right.
But she was so desperate. I said, okay, let's see what we get. And I used the Wild Unknown Tarot because I
Oh,
wanted something that was very symbolic, lacking people. Like, I didn't think I could tune in to my intuition deep enough if I was looking at the Knight of Cups. That's an actual, person holding a cup. Right. So I shuffled them and the way I do, and I laid out cards until I felt like I had enough. And it landed on, I think it was 4 or 5. And she looked at him and started crying. And I hadn't said a word at this point. And I said, and I waited for her to calm down. Are you okay? And she starts pointing at the cards. That's the tattoo that she and I had in secret. That's the family thing that we used to give for Christmas. That's like,
oh, wow.
that's the stuffed animal that we had in our room. Like, I never said a word. And she said, how much do I owe you? I said, nothing. That's the most incredible experience I've ever had as a reader. Like, how wonderful that was. And sometimes I think that's another important lesson too, is if you're reading for someone else and you lay out the cards, don't start talking immediately.
No.
Pause.
Yes.
Let it fill the room and see what comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because, and speaking of liminal space, a really good tarot reading becomes a liminal space.
Yes.
Becomes a place where, if both parties if the person who's getting read is comfortable, that they're very much as active as the reader is, and the world kind of falls away and incredible things can happen. And it's always more powerful if the person sitting across from you discovers it for themselves. If they can
Mm-hmm.
recognize it, they're going to remember that for the rest of your life, rather than just something that you say. um,
Right.
you know yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool that happened.
I know. It's I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. It is one of the most mind-blowing experiences of my life.
Well, I
Um,
making tarot cards, it makes me so happy to think that something I've created, um, is used at the most important junctures of people's lives, is used, at midnight on Halloween, like around the, it just is utter. It's like, I feel like I always wanted to be a ghost that would like come back and haunt like little girl sleepovers, like,
Yeah.
and like float their bodies and light as a feather, stiff as a board. So I feel like, but vis-a-vis the tarot decks that I create, I do feel like I'm in people's rooms and offices and giving them little jump scares and niggles and thoughts and ideas. Yeah, it makes me happy.
That is wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you created a tarot deck. It's out in the world. I promise you, somewhere, maybe even right now, there is a group of nervous hands getting the cards out, whispering to each other, should we do this? Are you sure? Is this going to be okay? Is something bad going to happen?
Oh, great.
And somebody's really excited because they think they want to be a witch more than anything in the world.
Yes.
And they're afraid to say it out loud. And they're just looking at those cards going, please,
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote my very first book, Tarot Diva, it was totally based on the first experience I had opening a deck of tarot cards, because I thought I would know what they meant when I opened them, because I figured I was like, I'm Sasha the witch born on Halloween. But when I opened up the cards, I didn't know what I was looking at all. And I couldn't read them. And I was so deflated. And then when I became professional at it, I didn't want other people who are that excited and like, oh, I want to play with mystery and these magical cards and be witchy. I didn't want them to be like, oh, I can't do this. It's so much. Because tarot is a lot. Like, tarot is a ginormous magical system. It can be intimidating. And I didn't want it to be intimidating.
I like you say that it's a lot, because I have this bookmarked in your book, The Magic of Tarot, on page 16. Bold letters, even. What I don't know about the cards is everything.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes.
Love that.
Yes, because if you're sitting down to a tarot reading and you feel like you already know like everything there is to know, well, what's the point of reading? Like, the whole reason that tarot readers exist in the shadows are to discover something we haven't seen before. So if you are sitting with a beginner mindset, everything is possible, and you want everything to be sheer possibility when you're sitting to read the cards, because the minute you think you know something, you've boxed it in, you've closed off potential. And that's the last thing that you want to do as a reader, as a practitioner. You want all the possibility to be there, so the kind of biggest thing can come through.
Yes.
So if you're not surprised, and that's why I created the Darkwood Tarot as a shadow deck, to challenge people to look at things they weren't looking at, because it's very easy to tell yourself what you want to hear when you're reading cards. It's very easy to justify yourself. It's, and we all do it, right? We all do it. But I think that we owe it to ourselves, those of us who do tarot on a regular basis, to really push the boundaries with ourselves, hold ourselves accountable, and look at the things that the cards are saying that we don't want to normally look at, so that we can discover new things.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's one more thing I want to ask you about tarot.
Yes.
It's something that I do. I know I can't be the only one. When you get a new deck, even part of the decision to buy a new deck, are there specific cards you have to see before you make that call? Or what would be your cards you go to first when you open up a deck to see them?
I'm very fortunate in that I get given, so I don't think I've bought a tarot deck in a long time, because my publishers are constantly sending them to me, and creators are sending them to me. So I'm very fortunate to be drowning in tarot cards. Thank you.
Nice.
World. What is there? Are there certain cards that No, actually,
no.
I'm more interested in the vibe of the whole. I'm more interested in the experience of the entire environment than in specific cards. Yeah,
I get that. I like the whole environment, but I do. I have to see the High Priestess. I have to see the Star. I have to see the Nine of Pentacles.
Love
The the Nine of Pentacles for me is no tarot artist knows they did it. I'm certain I could go summon the ghost of Pamela Coleman Smith, say, "Did you know?" Or Frida Harris and say, "Did you know that you captured the essence of the goddess Freya
that.
in
Hmm.
this card?" And
Hmm.
they'd be like, "Huh?" You know? But for me, that's what I see. So if I look through a deck and I don't feel that little wink back on the Nine of Pentacles, I don't want the deck.
Interesting.
That's just me. That's one of those big discerning factors for me. You know?
That's good. Then it makes it easy for you.
No, it doesn't. It makes it hard to find stuff sometimes. I have a large tarot collection. I Kickstarter is my jam. I love getting decks off of Kickstarter because they're so unique, and there's only so many of them in the world. That makes them feel better, feel more special. It's like those horror movies, you found the book. There's only 3 of them,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's so many of them. I like them for their overall theme and sense, but I wouldn't read with them because some of those cards are missing that extra little thing that I like about them.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah. All right. So, are there any myths or misconceptions about magic and witchcraft and tarot and all this stuff?
Oh my God.
That the new person out there just getting started, right? They saw Sasha Graham on Weird Web Radio. I've never heard Sasha Graham before, but I'm interested. What's a pitfall or something that they should avoid or ignore as advice?
I think that people should throw all of their tarot books out the window, even though I'm a writer, because that I think that people get. I think the biggest pitfall is feeling like you're going to get a card wrong, and that's just not true. They're what I don't know about the cards. The cards are everything. I always say to people, your entire life is a deck of tarot cards. Your entire experience of of being human is a deck of tarot cards, because tarot is really a mirror. And does the tarot have specific archetypal energies? Yes. Can you load on all of the different metaphysical and magical systems on top of tarot? 100% yes, that all exists. And that should all go into your tarot toolbox. Go really deep into it, because those things really you in numerous levels. But as a beginner, you don't have to worry about getting it right. You should just be in communication in space with the cards, because I always think about this too. Like, if any of us were kind of locked away, say we were like locked away in a Gothic tower for a year with nothing but, like, I don't know, toast and tea and a deck of tarot cards.
I love it.
By the end of that year, you would probably know everything you needed to know about tarot, just by like working with it and being with it and having it like, constantly there. So yeah, the most important thing you can take away from the cards is how you embody the cards, because then that's how they'll appear for you. And I don't know that those things can be found in books. So yeah.
Yeah, I really love that. And if the mowing in the background is getting on this recording, I'm going to curse that person. That's awesome. So I think this is a good place to kind of wrap up the regular portion of the show. Is there something I should have asked or something you'd like to talk about that I didn't cover?
No, not really. I mean, I think we talked about, the one thing I'd like to say is that a mini version of the Darkwood Tarot has just been released by Llewellyn. So it's a super cute, teeny tiny, like baby pocket size of the Darkwood Tarot. And I'd also really like to just tell everyone who's listening who loves tarot to please, please, please make sure they're not buying bootleg decks.
Yes.
Really big issue right now. We are losing tarot creators, artists, and writers are losing so much money because of companies like Temu and third-party sellers on Etsy and all. I mean, it's just pervasive. So if you've got a tarot deck with a QR code on the back, that is a bootleg deck. Make sure you're getting the decks that are actually sold by the creators and the publishers, because it's really an issue, and it's stealing, and that's bad mojo. It's really bad mojo to be reading with stolen cards. So yeah, I would just have people ask people to just be aware of who they're buying from and what they're buying from. Don't just blindly order off the internet because something's cheap. You're also going to get hosed too. You're going to get copied cards that aren't good quality.
Yeah, excellent point. That is something that's happening more and more. I've seen you post about it. I have seen Matt Oren talking about these issues. Llewellyn themselves, I've seen kind of raising awareness. Tempest, she's been, I think, raising the alarm. Now this has become a prevalent thing, and it is a problem. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and they're showing up in actual brick and mortar stores, which is heartbreaking too. You know, it used to be, well, as long as you know, if you go to a bookstore, you know, you can know that you're getting something. But even in bookstores, you can find you'll see fake decks. So yeah, buy real tarot decks, please.
Yeah. And speaking of Llewellyn, I did want to give a shout out to Marcus over there for connecting us and making this conversation possible. So thank you, Marcus. If you're listening, I appreciate you, my dude.
Yay! Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to take the rest of this conversation over to Patreon. But before we do, tell everybody where they can find you.
Anybody can find me at sashagraham.com. SashaGraham.com is kind of where you can find everything from my books to my socials, but I'm on Instagram, Sasha Tarot Diva, and Sasha Graham 1 on Facebook. But yeah, or just Google me. I'm like very Googleable, I think. About 100 pictures of me will show up and my books and stuff. So yeah, so come check it out. It's fun. I've got a book for everybody, whether you want like deep history or spells and spreads or magic. I've probably got something that might interest you. So check it out.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been one of my absolute favorite conversations ever. All right. And for everybody listening, thank you for listening. Please do share this show amongst your network, your socials, everything. Let people know what you like. Maybe they'll like it too. And if you want to hear the rest of this, you're going to have to go to Patreon. Go to weirdwebradio.com, click join the membership, or you can go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio. And as soon as you join for that bonus audio level, it'd be like buying me a cup of coffee at Starbucks. In fact, at this point in time, it's probably cheaper. And you'll gain instant access to the 7 seasons of archives as well. So there's a ton of amazing insight waiting for you in there, folks. All right. Stay weird out there, my friends. And now it is bonus audio time. Sasha Graham, are you ready?
I'm ready.
She's ready. Okay. Everybody always says that. The first, I think you're going to like this. The first question is always the same for the first trip here. What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit, and why?
Ooh.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions, magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.